Authors Alcove. I am your host, Agnes Wolfe. Today I have Clint Arthur. He's a Wharton Business School graduate and award-winning speaker. And he has shared the stage with Martha Stewart, Dr. Oz, Suzanne Somers, Caitlyn Jenner, Ice-T, and 5 presidents of the U.S. He lives in New York City, Los Angeles, and I never can say this, Acapulco, with his wife, Allie, and Nova, their billion-peso puppy. So y'all tell me about that. Today we are here to talk about his most recent book, Wisdom of the Men, which is his 21st best-selling book, was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. So today we're going to discuss just about how it became successful, how to market the book, and how he's using it for marketing. So welcome, Clint.
Yay, Angie.
So do you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and what got you into writing in this space?
I think I'm a writer. See, I've been writing forever. My creative writing teacher in high school was this man named Frank McCourt, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his memoir about his impoverished childhood in Ireland. It was called Angela's Ashes. And he became rich and famous around the world and inspired all of us to want to be writers. So I've been writing since I was about, I don't know, at least 16, maybe earlier. So I think I'm a writer, and I've been writing lots and lots of stuff. And I put my heart and soul into Wisdom of the Men. And since then, I've also written a novel, which I'm like revising the first draft of right now. So I'm very excited about that. But you have this remote viewer. He's like a psychic guy. Tell me that I'm really not a writer. I'm really more of a talk show host. So you tell me, well, what you think, okay?
All right. So you have actually written a lot of books, 21, I think it was.
21 bestsellers. I've written more than that because I write a lot of books for clients who hire me to write their books with them, usually. And that's a lot of fun. It helps me to get to know people. And I usually work with smart people who are nice and know a lot of stuff and tell good stories. So it's very interesting. And, I write those books really easy. Like the most recent book I wrote was called Bitcoin. Actually, it's called Satoshi, Bitcoin, and Me. And it's about this girl who met the inventor of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto. Yeah, the person that no one ever has met. Yeah, that's my latest book that just came out on Amazon on the Eclipse.
Nice. So let's just talk a little bit about Wisdom of Men. What should we expect from this particular book?
Well, that's about all the smartest stuff I learned from all the most amazing people in the world, including Dr. Oz, Dog the Bounty Hunter, George Bush, Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Mike Tyson, Martha Stewart, Oprah Winfrey, Caitlyn Jenner, Hillary Clinton. I've met all these people, and I asked most of them the same question: what's the most important thing you ever learned? And when I asked Mick Jagger, I said, Sir Mick, what's the most important thing you ever learned? He said, you can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you find you get what you need. And I know that's just a line out of his song, but it's one of the greatest songs of all time. And it really is a great philosophy of living. You don't always get what you want, but if you try, you do often get what you need.
That one's hard for me because some of the things that I've had happen are really rough, but they ended up being exactly what I needed, just not what I necessarily wanted.
Yeah, I hosted Tony Robbins' 60th birthday party, and I asked Tony the same question, and he said, life is happening for us.
Yep. Definitely agree with that. So what would you say is because you share a lot of different stories in this book, what would you say is one that has impacted you the most? Or at least impacted you one of the most?
When I was getting out of the Wharton Business School, I went home to get the attaboys from my parents. And I thought graduating from the Wharton Business School, the greatest business school in the world, was going to make me somebody special, that they would be really proud of me, and that would solve everything, all the problems of the world. And unfortunately, I get there and they get into the hugest argument of all time. They had always been arguing, but this one was a real monster. My dad storms out of the house and slams the door. And I'm sitting on the couch next to my mom, and I go, the way he resents you all these years, have you been cheating on Dad? And I'm thinking, holy cow, where did that question come from? I never even thought that question before. And I'm thinking, wow, what kind of a rude person to ask their mom a question like that? And then I'm thinking, how come she ain't answering the question? And then
Oh.
she goes, he's not your real father. Your real father was a doctor at the fertility clinic we went to for 6 years trying to have you. And you look just like that guy. I'm like, say what? So imagine how you would feel if everything you thought you knew about who you were. Oof. And not only did I not know who I was anymore, I just didn't know what I was going to be anymore. And I ran out to Hollywood to try to figure out who I was. And I started writing screenplays and going on auditions. And I found myself becoming a very important person in Hollywood. I became the Hollywood taxi driver. And I drove yellow cab number 6087 for almost 7 years during my 13 years of chasing the Hollywood dream. And on New Year's Eve of the millennium, I was behind the wheel of cab number 6087. And in the backseat of my cab were these two guys who were MBA interns at Goldman Sachs. And I'm listening in on their conversation while I'm driving them to a party in the Hollywood Hills. And one guy goes, hey, man, did you hear about Mr. Carrera? They made him the last partner right before the Goldman IPO, and he cashed out $1 gazillion. And I'm like, are you talking about Chris Carrera? How do you, Mr. Carrera? Chris Carrera was a pledge in my fraternity when I was in college. When I was the pledge master, I used to make those little punks dance around the living room of the house in their tighty whities. And now this guy just cashed out $1 gazillion. And that night, I went back to the boat where I was living in Marina Del Rey. I climbed up into my little V berth, the bunk in the front of the boat, and I had my flashlight, and I'm counting up my money. $513 driving a taxi on the Millennium. I was supposed to be special. And that was the night I took all the screenplays and I threw them in the dumpster and set them on fire. And that's when I said, I'm never going to write again.
And I believe you said that twice. So that was the first one. What was the second time?
That was the second time. That
Oh,
was
okay.
that was the second time. I had already quit writing once before. In college, I wrote a novel, and the creative writing teacher in the class, I gave it to him over the summer, and he never responded. Never responded to my novel. So that was actually my first novel that I wrote, and never read by anyone that I know of, because I don't know where that novel is now. That guy never responded to it. And I'm like, why? What's the point of writing? That was the first time I quit writing. But then when you're like wanting to be somebody in Hollywood, you have to write your own screenplays. So that's why I started writing again.
Oh, so that's why you
It's
started
like,
writing again. Okay.
yeah,
That was my next
it's like
question.
quitting smoking. I mean, I quit smoking after college, and I was quit smoking for 2 years, and I thought to myself, wow, I'm so quit from smoking, I could just have one. And I went to a party and had one cigarette, and the next day I was smoking a pack a day again, and I smoked cigarettes for like another 4 years after that. This is like a recurring theme in my life: quitting and going back. Quitting and going back, because I quit the men's teams also. Wisdom of the Men came out of my experiences as the leader of a men's team. And this is a men's self-help team that you get invited to join these teams after you take this one particular seminar that I took called the Men's Weekend. And after the men's weekend, they invite you to go on a team, and you have to go through this training program. And after the training program, you can join a team. So I went through the training program, and I went to one meeting of the team, and I quit. And I thought I would never go back. And the common wisdom is amongst the men, when a man quits, he's gone. Well, that took us all the way through to October of 2008, like 7 years after I took the men's weekend was October of 2008, and the world was melting down, and I was scared. So I went to try to find help at a men's self-help team meeting. And what's that look like? 18 naked guys dancing around a campfire, and I'm one of them. And I'm looking up at this brilliant, sparkling stars in the sky. And I see this one guy jump over the campfire, and I noticed he was really hairy. And then I saw the shaman on the other side of the crackling yellow and orange crackling flames. And he's like, "You don't know it yet, but you're already dead." What are you talking about, man? I'm the most successful guy on this team. 8 years ago, I was driving a cab. Now I'm a millionaire. I was living on a little boat. Now I live in a mansion. You're already dead. You just don't know it. And I didn't know what he was talking about, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd wake up out of the sound sleep in the middle of the night. I'm already dead. What does he mean? And then it came to be New Year's Day of 2009, and I woke up and poured myself a mimosa, and I asked myself a question inspired by the shaman. I don't think I'm dead. I think I'm alive, but what if I am dead? What if he's right? Or what if this was going to be the last year of my life? What would I want to accomplish if this was going to be the last year of my life? And I was surprised because the first thing I wrote down on my list was I got to write my book about what I learned at the Wharton Business School that helped me to become successful as a writer once I stopped trying to be a screenwriter and a movie star. And that was when I wrote what they teach you at the Wharton Business School, and that became my first best-selling book.
That's awesome. I feel like writing is one of those things that people are either born to be or they're not. Like everybody I've talked to who is a writer usually says that they feel like they are a writer. It's not that they write, they are a writer. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about writing. So one of the things I found very interesting that you had said in our communication before this was about public speaking and how it's a way of honing your stories to reduce the editorial time.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about that a little bit. But one thing that I also know is that that's actually one of the ways that I have thought about as far as marketing too. So I don't know so I kind of wanted to talk about both aspects of that. Because like I'm writing for middle school age group. And my theme in my particular book is sometimes to make peace, you need to start a war. Considering when I start marketing for my book, going around to middle schools and talking about how there has to be that balance of standing up for yourself, standing up for other people. And that is how you get true peace and what true peace really is. And so that's just kind of why I wanted why that particular thing really struck me, is because that is something that I plan on doing as far as helping me promote my book, but it might actually end up maybe honing to another story.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, that's why Frank McCourt's book was so great, I think, because when we were his students, what we loved about studying with Frank McCourt was that he would just tell us stories about his impoverished childhood in Ireland that were so funny and endearing and charming, instead of making us study The Scarlet Letter or Moby Dick. We would just listen to stories all the time. So while he was doing that, he was also performing his two-man show he would do with his brother, and they would perform that off Broadway for years. And that material that he worked on is what became his award-winning book. So when I was creating Wisdom of the Men, I did the same thing. I've been working on this book, on this material for years and years and years as a speaker, speaking on stages and telling these stories in my seminars. And that's why when I went with my wife, we did our Living Legends of Entrepreneurial Marketing seminar at Carnegie Hall with Martha Stewart and Ice-T and Michael Gerber, who wrote the best-selling entrepreneurship book of all time, The E-Myth, and the editor-in-chief of the National Enquirer, and Jerry from Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. It was an amazing conference. And after that, I took us on a celebratory tour in Europe. And our first stop was Paris for just a couple nights. And then we went to Venice. And when we arrived in Venice, it was like 11 o'clock at night. We're on a water taxi going down the Grand Canal. And it was the most mind-blowing experience of my life, because the architecture and the ingenuity of the city of Venice, Italy is unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. And, you know, you got these buildings just coming straight out of the water. How do they build them? And they're all so beautiful and hundreds of years old. And the architecture is just astounding. And the lights. And And as soon as we're like going down the Grand Canal, I was so inspired by this city. I thought to myself, I've been meaning to write Wisdom of the Men I came up with the idea in 2014, and this was 2019 when we did this trip. So 5 years I've been getting ready to write this book, and I've been intimidated by it because I knew it was going to be such an important book in my life. And when I saw the city of Venice, Italy, I thought, if I could just spend enough time in Venice, Italy, I could write this book. But we only had 2 days because everybody says you only need 2 days in Venice, Italy, which is wrong. Venice, Italy is amazing. So then that was 2019, October. Then COVID hits and I couldn't get back to Venice, Italy for 2 more years, but I wanted to write the book in Venice, Italy, because look, this is the thing about writing. I think where you write is just as important as anything else, because writing is just capturing your mood, your tone, your energy, your whole vibe. That's on the page. So if you write it in a cool place that's inspirational, it'll turn out better. So I really wanted to write the book in Venice, Italy. So I waited 2 more years to write this book until I could get back to Venice, Italy. And I had saved up a bunch of points in my Marriott Bonvoy account. It was Starwood at the time. Man, I'm still a Starwood person through and through. I love Starwood. But I booked us into a suite at the best hotel in Venice, Italy for 15 nights. And for 10 of those 15 nights, I wrote Wisdom of the Men. And that's how I wrote that book. And I could only have written that book in that short amount of time, because I knew all my stories. I'd been working on these stories for years and years and years and years, and teaching people. Like I teach an exercise in my class called Impact, Influence, and Income. That's the name of the class, how to have more impact, influence, and income. And this is an exercise that I take everyone through in the pool. And it is, can you see the pool?
Yes, I can.
Okay, that pool. All right.
Nice.
And yeah, and everybody's in that pool, and I take everybody through your story inventory. And I start out with your first memory, and we work up all the way to recent times. And everybody's like 40, 50 years old usually. So there's a lot of stories in that amount of time. So having done that exercise so many times with everybody and led them through it, that's led me through my own story inventory, time after time after time, thinking about the different things that have happened to me. And that's how I was able to have Wisdom of the Men turn out so good. It was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, and it's 90,000 words that I wrote in 10 days. And I could only have done that because I have been speaking these stories and working them out as a speaker.
That makes a lot of sense. I know for me, it's daydreaming. That's where but like I can definitely see, because I know that one of the best things for me, I don't necessarily public speak, but I actually share a lot of my stories with my husband. And he is not a fantasy writer or reader even, but he'll ask me questions and he'll help me develop and stuff. And so I can definitely see how, like, having those stories, having said them so many times, it's like you're able to just write it all out. That's really amazing. So how do you go about marketing your book? That's something that I know a lot of people who are writers that are checking out as the number one thing that people struggle with is marketing.
I know, I really understand. And you know, that's why I quit writing twice. It's how do you make money as a writer? And so I asked Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. I said, and that's one clue right there, is mentors. You got to have mentors. And I've had many, many, many mentors who have been successful writers. And I said, Jack, how do you sell 500 million Chicken Soup for the Soul books? And he said, well, you got to be kind of famous, because people don't buy books from nobodies. They only buy books from people who are kind of famous. So you got to go on TV and on the radio. There were no podcasts in those days, but podcasts are a way. And you got to become somebody. So that's what I really focused on. I mean, I started going on TV. After I wrote What They Teach You at the Wharton Business School, I had some money. So I called up a PR company and I said, I don't care what it costs. Book me on the Today Show. And the lady laughed at me. And she said, "That's the funniest thing I ever heard, Clint. You're a middle-aged guy nobody's ever heard of. You got a middle-aged book, you got a self-published book nobody's ever bought. You got no TV experience. Why are they going to put you on the Today Show? That's the number one show on TV. You're never going to get on that show. You have to go on little local TV shows." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm a native New Yorker, so get me on NBC New York." And she laughed at me again. And she goes, "Wow, I think I really discovered your true calling. You're not really a business author. You're a freaking comedian, because that's the second hysterically funny thing you've said in 30 seconds. They're never going to put you on NBC New York. That's the number one station in the number one market in America. That's the same as being on national TV. You got to go on little tiny local TV shows." And I'm like, "What, like Salt Lake City, Utah?" And she goes, "Don't forget to pack your long underwear," because she sent me to Salt Lake City, Utah at the end of January. And there I was, like flying in on Southwest Airlines, and it's like snow everywhere. And I'm thinking to myself, are they really going to put me on TV in Salt Lake City, Utah? I'm a middle-aged guy nobody's ever heard of. I got a self-published book nobody ever bought. I got no TV experience, but they did put me on TV, and I sucked. And it's a lucky thing I wasn't on the Today Show, because I would have sucked even worse. I really definitely would. I mean, by the time I got on the Today Show, that was my 57th television appearance. And I show up there, and Brooke Shields is sitting 6 feet away from me, and she's interviewing me. And she goes, "You talk a lot about being comfortable outside of your comfort zone." I said, "Yeah, life begins where your comfort zone ends." And she goes, "Oh, that sounds scary." And I said, "Yeah, when it's scary is when it's great." But if I hadn't been on 56 TV shows before that, I would have been too scared to have that conversation. I really would. There's like, when you're on the Today Show, there's 1,000 lights in the ceiling and 10 cameras and 100 people in the studio all watching you and listening to everything that you're saying, and Brooke Shields sitting right there. So uh, the answer to the question is, how do you make money as an author? Well, what you will come to find out is that most likely you will not make money from selling your books. Most likely, selling your books will be a vehicle. I mean, your book will be a vehicle to making you kind of famous, because I'm not famous. One of the articles about me, if you Google my name on the internet, you'll see an article in the California Business Journal that says the most famous guy in the world that nobody's ever heard of. And that's who I am. I've been on 137 television appearances, on every show in the world. I've been in every publication and everything like that, but I'm not famous, except to my clients and prospects. They think I'm kind of famous. And that's what you're going to find out, is that, like, being a writer is not about really selling books. It's really about who you become in this process and how you can sell who you are.
That kind of goes back to you said that it's a vehicle for marketing yourself. So it's kind of like building your brand as a human being, not necessarily as the book that you're writing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, your personal brand. Your brand is a human being. I never heard anybody say that before. That's really funny. But you are who you are. And people are buying your book because they want to buy a piece of you. People are buying your course or your seminar because they want to really learn from you. And people are buying you as a consultant or a coach. That's really how you make the money, not from the book. The book positions you to be able to get a lot of money for those money-making opportunities.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the things that really struck me that you were talking about too is something that I hear from, because the last question I ask everybody is, what is one piece of advice you'd give to a not yet published author? And the one I hear the most is, your first draft is going to suck. That's just like, it's going to be crap, but you can't edit nothing, but you can edit crap. Like, that's kind of what you were saying. Like, your first interview did not go well, and how you just had to do that first interview though. Like, you just had to do it. Otherwise, you would have never gotten to the 51st or 52nd, whichever one it was, when you finally got into the Today Show.
Yeah, you are not going to be great when you start, but you're going to suck when you start, but you have to suck if you're ever going to be great. And you don't have to be great when you start, but you do have to start if you're ever going to be great. Those are the things. Yeah, you got to. And you need something. That's what I love about being a writer, is that I go into a hotel suite or a room, wherever. Usually I like to write books in hotels or walking around. And when you're done, like I focus really intensely. I like to write my books or my projects. Boom, there's nothing. And then a couple of days later, now I have a book. The Satoshi Bitcoin and Me, we wrote the first draft in 2 days. And a lot of times, if you just focus really intensely for a couple of days, or I am able to focus really intensely for a couple of days, and then boom, there's 20,000 words, 40,000 words, 90,000 words, whatever it is. Usually a couple of days is a 20,000 word book. Wisdom of the Men was 10 days, and that's a 90,000 word book. So, but I took it easy on myself. I didn't write I only wrote a couple hours a day when I was doing that book. But that's what I love about writing, is that you start with nothing, and then a few days later, you have something. You have something, even though it may suck, even though it's not great, it's something. And you can make something out of nothing, and then you can make that something better. So a lot of times you could call it ready, fire, aim. That's a really good way to do it. It's like ready, fire, aim. You make something and then you make it better. That's a very good strategy for success.
So my husband is more of a business-minded person, and one of the books that you mentioned was E-Myth. So I'm going to ask you a question about, so his favorite book, the book that he made me read E-Myth, but he also made me read Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. What is a self-development book that first one that you wrote that you would love for everyone to read, but also one that you have read that is somebody else's book?
Well, Wisdom of the Men, yeah, Wisdom of the Men is, if you're a person who wants to have more impact, influence, or income, Wisdom of the Men will really help you to see what it takes and will guide you along the way. It is a self-development book because everything I do is really designed to help people to be more and do more and have more. So even though it's stories from my life, I believe if you cannot teach through story, then you don't know how to teach. So I tell all these stories as teaching tools. So that's the book, the best one. A self-development book that I read by somebody else would be The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, who is another one of the people that I wrote about. It's a story. These are stories about Toltec wisdom, and it's a very quick read, and it has influenced my life immensely ever since I read it, like in 2002. And you can read it on an exercise bicycle in an hour. It's really, really great.
Can you repeat that? Because I already forgot the title.
The Four Agreements.
The Four Agreements. Okay. All right. I'll be able to re-listen to this anyway, but like I'm trying to remember so I can Google it as soon as we're done. But
it's really easy and fast.
Great. Thank you. So thank you so much for being on here. And I am going to ask you the same question that I ask everybody else. And what is one piece of advice that you would give to a not yet published author? And it can be in any genre or it can be specifically in self-development.
Right. I would really say that the most important thing is just having the book, because it's really less about the book than it is about what this book process is going to do to you.
I like that. I like that a lot.
At the end of the day, I've been very fortunate. I went from being a taxi driver to being a guy who's driven many of my dream cars. And at the end of the day, it's not the houses or the cars or the trips or the money or the celebrities or the presidents. It's about who you become in this process. And being a writer is a very special thing that is unique in that you have a lot of control over your own work product. Nobody can tell you what to write or not to write unless you sell your book to a major publisher, which I've done too. And I don't recommend that. That's why I self-publish everything now, is to maintain the control. So you get to create what you want, and then you get to put it out in the world, and then you get to use it as a tool to build a future for yourself, however you can dream it. And I try to help people to make their dreams come true.
Amazing. I do want to ask you, normally that's the last question I ask, but you mentioned that you have done both traditional and self-publishing. What were some of the drawbacks of the traditional publishing?
Well, it's not your book anymore. You sell them your book, and then they basically will, these days, give you a pittance and distribute the book for you. But you're still responsible for marketing the book. You're still responsible for getting people to buy the book. You're still responsible for promoting the book, except they call it what they want. They'll change the title to whatever they want. They'll tell you to rewrite it over and over. One of my mentors allegedly gave back a 7-figure advance because they wanted him to completely change the style of the book, and he didn't do it. And he went with a hybrid publisher kind of thing and ended up with a New York Times bestseller that became a big book, just the way he wrote it. So Random House was wrong. Just because it's some big publishing company doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about. If you have a strong vision, you got to remember you're going to do the marketing anyway. So you might as well stay in control.
One of my favorite authors I've ever interviewed on here, I'll just tell her, is Shel Cypress. It's a fantasy writer. But she actually turned down being traditionally published too because she realized that she didn't want to do that. And it's an amazing book. And now she's self-published. And like when I tell other people, you should read this, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that book. And I'm like, it's just an indie author that just started she published her book in November, and or maybe October of November last year. And people are already having heard of it because it's a good quality book. And she wasn't willing to compromise what she had. She wanted to have control over it. And so I'm glad that she did that. So
yeah, well, it also sounds like she's getting out there and promoting it.
Yeah, she is. She's doing a great job. She has the TikTok. I follow her on TikTok and everything. So, but anyway, thank you again, Clint, for taking time out of your schedule to chat with me. I also want to thank my listeners. If you're interested in learning more about his books, you can find them at his website, clint.com. That's 3 T's, so CLIN with 3 T's.com. He has written several books, including the one we just discussed, Wisdom of the Men. Again, thank you very much, Clint. I really appreciate you being on here.
All right.
Thank you for joining us at Authors Alcove, the Writing Corner. We hope today's discussion has inspired and informed your writing journey. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review to help us reach more writers like you. And remember, we are brought to you today by the letter K, as in Knowadays, K-N-O-W, knowadays.com, a company that offers many courses from how to become a freelance writer to how to become a proofreader and editor. Also, I'm always appreciative of any of you who support me on Patreon. You can find the links in the show notes. Also, you can check out me at Authors Alcove, the Healing Place, where authors share about their books on healing and recovery. You can also find me at the Authors Alcove, the Reading Nook, where we talk about reading fantasy, sci-fi, and the occasional horror. Until next time, keep writing, keep creating, and we'll see you back in the Writing Corner.